What if the people who look powerful are not the ones who actually decide what happens? Imagine this. A leader stands on a bright stage. Lights, applause, flags, slogans about the people. It looks like millions of voices are in control, but somewhere far from that stage, in a quiet room with no cameras, a very small group of people meets. No speeches, no big words, just one simple question. Is this leader still useful to us? If the answer is yes, the leader stays. If the answer is no, the leader falls. Not because of big ideas, not because of justice or injustice, but because a handful of people decided their interests were no longer being served. In public, we see ideals, freedom, order, progress, tradition. Behind the curtain, the question is much simpler. Who keeps this leader in power, and what do they get in return? This video is about that hidden question, and it's based on a book with a very direct claim. If you want to understand politics, stop thinking about good and bad people. Start thinking about who needs whom to stay in power. Many of us grow up with a comforting belief about power. We're told that good leaders care about everyone, bad leaders care only about themselves. We often imagine that if a country is doing well, it must be because the leader is wise, kind, or clever. If it's doing badly, it must be because the leader is cruel, foolish, or corrupt. We tell ourselves, if people suffer, it's because someone at the top is evil. If people prosper, it's because someone at the top is noble. So when we see injustice, we say, we just need better people in charge. A more honest person, a more intelligent person, a more compassionate person. The Dictator's Handbook suggests something far less comforting. It says, don't start with personality. Start with the system of power around the person. Ask, how many people does this leader actually need to keep their job? Who are those people? What do they get for supporting the leader? And what happens to them if they stop? The book argues that leaders, from the harshest tyrant to the most celebrated elected official, all face the same basic problem. They must keep a small group of key supporters happy enough so that those supporters don't replace them. If that small group is very small, the leader can stay in power by rewarding just a few loyal people. If that group is very large, the leader must keep a lot more people at least somewhat satisfied. It's not mainly about, is this a good person? It's more about, what do they have to do given the structure they are in to survive? This sounds cold. It sounds almost cynical, but it is also strangely clarifying. Because if leaders survive by pleasing those who keep them in power, then the real question becomes, who actually matters in this system? Whose support is essential, and whose voices are mostly decoration? The Dictator's Handbook by Bruce Bueno de Mesquita and Alastair Smith is a book about those hidden rules of power. It looks at politics not as a heroic story of great individuals, but as a game with very specific rules. The authors use a simple idea. Every leader, no matter where they are, must gather and hold on to enough support from the right people to keep their position. They focus on three key groups: everyone who could have a say, the smaller group that actually has a say, and the tiny group that a leader absolutely cannot afford to lose. The book explores how these groups change from place to place, how they shape decisions, and why some leaders invest in schools, roads, and health, while others invest in secret police, favors, and fear. It does not spend much time telling dramatic life stories of leaders. It does not ask, is this person good or bad? Instead, it asks, what are the incentives here? What is rewarded? What is punished? Sometimes this makes the world of politics look darker. We see more self-interest, more deal-making, more trade-offs. But it can also make us see patterns we could not see before. Why some promises are never kept, why some scandals are forgiven, and why some are not. In this video, we'll walk slowly through two of the book's core ideas, then tell a story that shows how these ideas can play out behind the scenes, and finally we'll step back and ask, what does this mean for the way we see power and for the way we see our own choices? The small group that really matters. The first big idea is simple, but once you see it, you might find it everywhere. The authors say, every political system has three main groups. Let's call them the possible supporters, the real selectors, the winning group. We'll keep the language simple. We'll give them clearer names. Group 1, the crowd of possibles. This is everyone who could, in theory, play a role in choosing the leader. In some systems, this might be almost every adult. In others, it might be only party members, or only military officers, or only members of a royal family. Think of this group as the big pool of people the leader might need to care about, at least on paper. Group 2, the actual choosers. Inside that big pool, there's a smaller group, the ones who actively choose who leads. Maybe they vote, maybe they sit on a council, maybe they trade support quietly in back rooms. This group is smaller than the big pool. Not everyone in the crowd of possibles really gets a meaningful say. We can call them the actual choosers. Group 3, the essential few. And inside that group is an even smaller circle, the people without whom the leader cannot survive. If they turn against the leader almost certainly falls. Maybe they control the security forces. Maybe they fund the party. Maybe they hold key positions that can shift support overnight. This last group is the winning group. If the leader keeps them on their side, they stay in power. If the leader loses too many of them, no amount of speeches will save them. Now, why does this matter? Because the size of that winning group changes almost everything. Let's use simple, neutral examples. Example 1, a tiny team running a private club. Imagine a private club. Officially, every member of the club can vote on the club president. That's the big pool of possibles. In reality, only a small committee decides. Maybe 5 longtime members who manage the money and the rules. Those 5 are the actual choosers. But even inside that committee, maybe 2 people really control everything. They own the building. Without them, the club has nowhere to meet. Those 2 people are the winning group, the essential few. If you are the club president, who do you really need to keep happy? You might give friendly speeches to all members. You might talk about serving everyone. But in the back of your mind, you know, if those 2 owners turn against me, I am finished. So what are you likely to do? You might give those 2 special treatment, free services, private access, influence over decisions. You might listen carefully to their needs, even if other members complain. You are not doing this because you are a bad person. You are doing this because your position depends on them. Example 2, a large school election. Now imagine a big school where every student can vote for the student council president. The big pool of possibles and the actual choosers are almost the same group. The winning group, the number of people you need to win the election, is much larger. You can't stay in power by only pleasing 2 or 3 close friends. You need wide support. So, what makes sense for you to do? Instead of giving special favors to 2 people, you might promise things many students can enjoy. Better events, cleaner facilities, more clubs. Those are public benefits, not private gifts. You have to think about what a large number of people care about. Again, this is not because you're better than the club president. It's because the structure around you rewards different behavior. This is the heart of the first idea. When the essential group is small, leaders survive by taking care of a few key backers. When the essential group is large, leaders have to take care of many more people. The book argues that we should stop asking, "Why are some leaders so selfish?" and start asking, "How big is the group they must keep happy, and how easy is it for that group to replace them?" Because if the group is very small and very powerful, it is risky for them to share that power or to invest widely in everyone else. But if the group is large, it becomes risky not to care about the broader public, because unhappy large groups can sometimes coordinate and remove leaders. This three-layer picture, the big pool of possibles, the actual choosers, and the essential winning group, helps us see that behind every smiling leader is a more serious question. How many people do I really need? Who exactly are they? And what must I give them so that they keep me here? That brings us to the second big idea: private rewards versus public goods. Now that we have the three groups, we can look at the next step. What do leaders give to stay in power? The book makes a sharp distinction between two types of benefits: private rewards, things that only a few people get. For example, special contracts, exclusive positions, secret payments, special protection, personal gifts, public goods, things that many people share. For example, clean water, safe streets, public transport, education, basic health care, stable rules everyone can trust. The key claim is this: if a leader only needs a small winning group, it often makes more sense for them to use resources on private rewards to keep that small group loyal. If a leader needs a large winning group, it often makes more sense to use resources on public goods that many people can enjoy. Let's walk through this slowly. Step 1. The logic of a small winning group. Imagine you are a leader who needs the support of only 10 powerful people to stay in power. You control resources, money, jobs, permissions, secrets. You have a choice. Option A: use those resources to improve life for millions of ordinary people. Option B: use those resources to give big rewards to those 10 key backers. What happens if you choose option A? Maybe you build schools, hospitals, roads, or digital networks. Millions benefit. But your 10 key people get nothing special. If those 10 people ever think about replacing you, they have a simple choice. Should we keep this leader who used resources to help everyone, or should we bring in a new leader who will use those same resources to make us richer? The safe choice for them might be to find someone new, someone who will treat them better than everyone else. So in a system with a small winning group, using lots of resources on public goods can actually be risky for the leader. Now look at option B. You use resources to make those 10 people personally better off. You give them exclusive contracts, special powers, personal benefits. Now, if they think about replacing you, they must ask, will a new leader be as generous to us as the current one? If the answer is uncertain, it is safer to stay loyal. So, in a small group system, private rewards are like glue. They keep the essential few stuck to the leader. This doesn't mean such leaders never provide public goods. They might need some, enough security to prevent chaos, some basic services to keep the broader population calm and able to work. But the priority tends to be the supporters who can end their rule with a single decision. Step 2. The logic of a large winning group. Now imagine your winning group is very large. Instead of 10 key backers, you need the support of millions of people, or at least a big part of them. Can you keep millions loyal with private rewards? Not easily. You cannot give a secret deal to everyone. You do not have enough resources to buy the loyalty of millions one by one. If you try, you run out of money. You create anger among those left out. Your position becomes weaker. In a large group system, buying loyalty individually is too expensive and too risky. So what works better? Investing in public goods. If you improve schools, healthcare, safety, transport, communication, many people benefit at once. You don't have to know each person's name. You just have to create conditions that most people prefer over the alternative. And if you fail to do this, if life becomes clearly worse for many people, your risk increases. Large groups may decide to support a rival who promises to improve things. So in large group systems, leaders are pushed by survival to care more about public goods. Again, this doesn't mean they are saints. They might still seek private comforts, personal benefits, or favoritism for close friends. But the structure forces them to think more often about the broad public because their position rests on that broad support. Step 3. The rules leaders tend to follow. The authors of the book summarize this logic into a few rules that many leaders follow, often without saying them out loud. Rephrased in simple language, they sound like this. Try to keep the essential winning group as small as possible, so it is easier and cheaper to satisfy. Try to keep the big pool of possibles as large as possible, so that each person in your winning group knows they can be replaced if they are disloyal. Use private rewards to keep key supporters loyal, especially in systems with small winning groups. Spend just enough on public goods to keep the broader population from becoming a serious threat. Always remember that supporters are loyal not to you, but to the benefits they receive. Framed this way, it can sound like a cold instruction manual for ruthless leaders. But we do not have to read it that way. We can read it as a warning. If we create systems where leaders need only a few people to survive, we should not be surprised if they focus on those few. If we want systems where leaders must care about the broader public, we need arrangements where their winning group is larger, and where many people have a real way to withdraw support when things go badly. The theory does not say that people are incapable of kindness or morality. It simply says that survival pressures are strong. And if we ignore those pressures, we will keep being surprised by the way power behaves. To bring these ideas to life, let's move into a story. The City of Two Circles picture, a city called Lumeria. From above, Lumeria looks like a shining circle of lights, surrounded by a ring of dimmer neighborhoods. In the center of the city, there is a tall glass tower. That is where the council rules from. They speak often about all the people of Lumeria. Around the tower, in a well-guarded district, lives the inner circle, about 100 powerful figures. They own major companies. They command special security units. They control important media channels. Far beyond them, past markets and crowded streets, live the outer circle, millions of ordinary citizens. They vote in public events. They march on holidays. They listen to speeches. The leader of Lumeria is called the First Chair. Every 5 years, there is a grand ceremony where the first chair is confirmed. In theory, the outer circle votes. In practice, everyone knows, unless the inner circle agrees, no one can become first chair. Now, for many years, Lumeria was stable but unfair. The inner circle enjoyed wide avenues, private clinics, special schools, quiet gardens. The outer circle lived with unreliable power, crowded hospitals, and few opportunities. When the outer circle complained, the council would promise reforms. Some streets would be cleaned, some projects would start, but then they would stop. The first chair did not like to see so much inequality. In private, they felt uneasy. But they also knew a simple truth. I need the inner circle to keep me on this chair. So most resources went to keep the inner circle content. New contracts, new trusts, new protections. Life in the outer circle improved slowly, if at all. One year, after a series of floods and shortages, something began to change. The outer circle started to talk to each other in new ways. In markets, in factories, in crowded buses, they whispered, "Why is the inner circle always taken care of first? Why do our children face the same problems our parents faced?" At first, those were only words, but then they turned into organized complaints. Neighborhood groups formed. Workers met secretly. Screens in small homes started to show messages noticeably different from the usual slogans. The inner circle watched this with concern. Some said, "It will pass." The outer circle always grumbles and then forgets. Others said, "Do not worry. The first chair has kept us happy. We owe them loyalty." But a few members of the inner circle noticed something else. They saw that the outer circle was learning to coordinate. They were no longer just scattered voices. They were starting to act together, and acting together, they were beginning to matter. One evening, in a quiet restaurant overlooking the tower, 6 key figures from the inner circle met for dinner. Behind closed doors, they spoke openly. What if the outer circle becomes strong enough to influence the next confirmation? One asked. Then the first chair will need them more than us, another replied. If that happens, our special contracts, our protections, our advantages could disappear. A silence followed. Then one of them said carefully, "Unless we act before that happens." The table fell quiet again. Over the next months, strange rumors began to move through the inner circle. Some said the first chair had lost their touch. Others said the first chair was too soft, too worried about fairness, too willing to listen to the outer circle. At the same time, a new figure began to appear in private meetings. A younger council member with close ties to security forces and to several key businesses. This new figure spoke a simple language. "I will protect your interests. I will keep the outer circle calm. You will not lose what you have built." Slowly, not all at once, members of the inner circle started to shift their support. Some cut backroom deals. Some promised funding. Some quietly introduced the new figure to their own networks. The first chair noticed that meetings felt colder. Once friendly faces became distant. Plans to slowly improve services for the outer circle met new resistance. One day, during a routine council session, the first chair opened a folder expecting to sign another confirmation document. Instead, they found an announcement. For the good of stability, the council had agreed to transfer leadership to a stronger hand. Security guards who once protected the first chair now stood between them and the exit. Outside, the city looked the same. The tower shone, cars moved, people worked. Inside, everything had changed. The inner circle had decided that the first chair was no longer the best option for protecting their position. The outer circle heard the news in the usual way, through official channels. The message said it was a smooth transition made in their name. Some people believed it, some did not. Most could do little about it. The new leader took the chair. In the following years, they followed a clearer pattern. Resources flowed steadily toward the inner circle. Private favors were expanded. Public promises were made, but carefully limited. The outer circle was given enough to avoid open chaos, but not enough to become strong or independent. In speeches, the new leader talked about unity, tradition, and courage. In private, they followed the quiet rule: keep the essential few happy and manage the rest just enough to avoid real danger. Let's pause and look under the surface of what happened in Lemuria. On the outside, it might look like a normal change of leadership, one leader out, another in. But through the lens of the Dictator's Handbook, we see something else: a shift in the balance between the winning group and everyone else. First, define the groups in this story. The big pool of possibles was everyone in Lemuria, all citizens, at least in theory, since they were told they had a role in choosing leaders. The actual choosers were the council, and behind it, the inner circle, who had real influence over who could become first chair. The winning group, the essential few, were those key members of the inner circle whose combined support was necessary for any leader to stay in power, the ones with control over security, money, and stories. The first chair's survival depended not on pleasing the millions in the outer circle, but on pleasing that small, powerful group. For a while, the first chair managed both. They kept the inner circle satisfied with private rewards, while offering just enough to the outer circle to prevent deep unrest. But then the outer circle began to coordinate. They developed new ways to share information, to discuss their situation, to feel part of a larger we. This was a subtle threat, not because they suddenly became the winning group, but because they were shifting the costs and risks for the inner circle. If the outer circle grew strong enough to influence the next confirmation, the inner circle might lose their special position. So the inner circle faced a calculation. Option 1, stick with the first chair, who was starting to listen to the outer circle and talk about fairer policies. Option 2, replace the first chair with someone more clearly committed to protecting the inner circle's private rewards. Psychologically, this is about fear of loss. The inner circle was less worried about the suffering of the outer circle and more worried about losing their own advantages. Socially, it was about coordination. No single member wanted to move first against the first chair in case they failed and faced punishment. But once a small group of 6 influential figures signaled support for a new leader, others felt safer to follow. This is the power of a winning group. Once a certain number of key players agrees, a leader's fate can turn very quickly. Notice also what happened with Story. Outwardly, the change was explained as a move for stability and the good of the people. Inwardly, it was about securing the flow of private rewards to the winning group. The language used in public hid the true logic in private. This is common. In many systems, leaders must wrap self-interested decisions in noble language because no one likes to admit that a small group is protecting its own position. Another psychological element is the difference between gratitude and expectation. At first, the inner circle may have felt grateful to the first chair. They received privileges that others did not. Over time, those privileges stopped feeling like gifts and started feeling like rights. When that happens, benefits lose their power to create loyalty. They become the baseline. To renew loyalty, leaders feel pressure to offer more deals, more protection, more exceptions. If a leader ever tries to stop or reduce these private rewards, supporters can feel betrayed, even if the leader is simply trying to shift resources toward public goods. This is often why leaders who push for fairness toward the broader public face resistance, not only from obvious opponents, but also from former allies. They are not seen as doing the right thing. They are seen as changing the deal. In Lemuria, the first chair began to see that the outer circle needed more. But as they shifted attention toward public goods, key members of the inner circle felt uneasy. What if this means less for us? From there, events followed the logic described in the book. The winning group felt threatened. They searched for a leader who would protect their interests more clearly. They coordinated a transition before the broader population could gain enough influence to change the rules. The outer circle did not become irrelevant. Their potential for unrest still mattered. But they were not the group that truly chose the leader. Their support was something to be managed, not something essential for the leader's survival, at least for now. After hearing this, you might feel a mix of reactions. Maybe you feel a kind of disappointment, a sense that behind the beautiful language of politics, there are cold calculations. Maybe you feel clarity. Of course, this is how power works. I always sensed it, but never had the words. Maybe you feel troubled because this way of thinking seems to strip away our belief in ideals. So let's slow down and ask some careful questions. When you see a leader speak, any leader, anywhere, who do you imagine they are really talking to? The crowd in front of them, the cameras, or a much smaller group, watching quietly, whose support they must keep? When public opinion changes, how does that actually happen? Do people suddenly discover new facts? Or do they slowly respond to how those in their community frame events, reward agreement, and punish disagreement? What shapes what we pay attention to? Is it random? Or is our attention pulled toward certain topics because they matter to the people who control information, fund campaigns, or run organizations? When a policy is chosen, how often is it the result of pure debate about what is best for everyone? And how often is it the result of compromise and negotiation between key groups with their own private concerns? None of these questions requires us to blame anyone. We do not need to say, all leaders are evil, or all supporters are selfish. We can simply ask, who has the power to decide who leads? How easy is it to remove a leader who fails to deliver basic public goods? How large is the group a leader must keep satisfied to survive? How free are people to coordinate, to share information, to change their mind without fear? Our opinions, our hopes, even our anger are often shaped by these quiet structures. We might think we are purely reacting to the news, but the news itself is filtered through choices made by editors, owners, and gatekeepers. We might think our vote, our comment, or our silence is unimportant. But in the long run, what large groups of people choose to tolerate, ignore, or insist on creates the space in which leaders operate. The book does not tell us what to believe in. It simply says, if we want to understand why things are the way they are, we must look not only at words and emotions, but also at structures and incentives. And once we see that, we can ask, what do we want to reward? And what do we want to make too costly to continue? So what can you take from these ideas? Not as a politician, not as a strategist, but as a person trying to think more clearly about power. Here are a few gentle lessons. 1. Look for the real winning group. When you see decisions that seem strange or unfair, ask yourself, who actually had the power to make this happen? Whose support was essential? Sometimes the answer is not the people, but a smaller group, donors, senior managers, party insiders, major clients, or powerful institutions. This question does not solve everything, but it helps cut through confusion. 2. Separate stories from incentives. Leaders use stories. They must. They talk about unity, greatness, change, tradition, security, freedom. Stories matter, They bind people together, they inspire. But behind every story are incentives. Ask, if this person does what they are promising, who gains power and who loses it? If they fail to deliver, who has the ability to remove them? If the answer is almost no one, you can expect them to worry less about broad public opinion. If the answer is a very large number of people, you can expect them to be more sensitive to public mood. 3. Notice coalition sizes in everyday life. These ideas are not only about national politics. Think about workplaces, clubs, online communities, even friend groups. Who is the leader there? Who are their essential few? Is it a small inner circle or a wider base? In a workplace, for example, a manager might care more about what a handful of senior executives think than about what dozens of ordinary workers feel. Not because they hate workers, but because their own job security depends more on that small group. Understanding this can help you see why some decisions are made and what kind of pressure might actually matter. 4. Be careful with blame. It is tempting to say, all problems come from bad people in charge. The Dictator's Handbook suggests something more complex. Even well-intentioned people can end up making harmful decisions if the structure around them rewards that behavior. And even selfish people can sometimes do good things if their survival depends on serving a broad public. This doesn't mean we should excuse harm or stop caring about character. It simply means we should be careful not to stop at, how could they do that? And instead also ask, what system made that behavior the easiest path to staying in power? 5. Think about how you join, support, or resist systems. In your own life, you are part of many groups, companies, communities, platforms, networks. Each of them has its own winning group, its own incentives, its own quiet rules. You might not be able to change those rules alone, but you can decide which systems you want to support, which behavior you want to normalize, when to speak, and when silence would feel dishonest to you. Clarity about how power works won't give you complete control, but it can give you a clearer map. And with a clearer map, your choices, even small ones, can be more intentional. When I think about the ideas in the Dictator's Handbook, I feel two things at once. On one side, it feels cold. It reduces big ideals to calculations about who needs whom to stay in power. It can make hope feel naive, as if all that matters is deals and survival. On the other side, it feels honest. It gives language to patterns many people already sense. Why some promises vanish after elections, why some leaders seem untouchable, why some reforms never quite arrive. Maybe both feelings can sit together. We can accept that incentives matter, that structures push people in certain directions, without giving up on the idea that choices still matter too. This theory does not explain everything. People are not machines. They have values, habits, loyalties, memories, fears, and moments of courage that no model can fully predict. But looking at power through the lens of who really matters to a leader and what they get in return can protect us from simple stories. It can help us stay calm when we see disappointing behavior. Not calm as in indifferent, but calm as in, I see the pattern, I understand the pressure. Now, what can actually be changed and what cannot? And sometimes that kind of calm clarity is more powerful than anger without direction. We have walked through two big ideas: that every leader rests on a winning group they cannot afford to lose, and that the size of that group pushes them toward either private rewards for a few or public goods for many. We followed those ideas into a story, and then back out into our own questions about attention, opinion, and responsibility. Now the choice is yours. The next time you hear a speech, a promise, or a slogan about the people, you can let it wash over you. Or you can quietly ask, who does this leader really need to keep their power? What are they giving to that group? And what does that mean for the rest of us? And beneath all of that, there is one deeper question I want to leave you with. Do you think ideas like this still shape our world today?